Hi everyone! As 2020 draws to a close, I wanted to take a look back at some of the games that I've played this year. It's been a tough year for everyone, and games have provided a much needed source of entertainment and escapism throughout it. There have been some incredible games released this year, but I'm not here to talk about them, I'm here to talk about the bad ones. So here's my list of the most disappointing games of 2020. First off, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. This was one of the first games that I played this year, and though the preview coverage wasn't very inspiring when it came down to the combat system, I don't think I was quite ready for just how bad it really is. Combat in Kakarot is an extremely shallow and poor interpretation of what Dragon Ball is. Yeah, it's flashy and there's Kamehamehas and you fly around and all that, and it honestly does look absolutely incredible. However, once you actually start playing it, you realize it's nothing like Dragon Ball at all. Every enemy, from the lowest possible one to the most iconic villains, have uninterruptible attacks, which means that even if you're like Super Saiyan level 3 Goku and you're hitting a dude in the face with a Kamehameha, he can still fly through it and punch you right through it like nothing's going on. This takes the combat system from mediocre to absolute garbage. And the reason why this game is so disappointing is because they crafted a beautiful world for this game. This really does feel like you're in Goku's version of the Earth, but the entire experience is broken because of how awful and poorly designed the combat system is. If this had decent fights, it would easily be the best Dragon Ball game ever made. But apparently, that's kind of asking for too much. Next up, The Last of Us Part 2. To be fair, I wasn't really expecting this game to be very good. I remember back when the first game was released, they said they wouldn't be making a sequel unless they had a really good story to tell. Well, they lied. The Last of Us Part 1 is an amazing experience. They basically turned a game-long escort mission, which seems like a terrible idea to begin with, into one of the most memorable video games that I've ever played. Character development in Part 1 is masterfully done. The way that Ellie and Joel start to bond with one another is so realistic and so well portrayed, both through their dialogue and by some really clever gameplay design, that is just, it's incredibly compelling. And also the side characters are just incredible as well. Part 2 is none of these things. There is no character development, there is just punishment. There's nothing to the story except for a mirror image of two female characters dealing with the consequences of their anger and thirst for revenge. The game drags 15 hours too long as it tries to jam you into playing as both Ellie and Abby, so you get to experience the same timeline from two different perspectives, with Abby being portrayed in a much more positive light than Ellie. Ellie's character gets destroyed and turned into something else to just repeatedly hammer home the point that revenge isn't actually good. Ellie changes from being a one-man army to a mumbling idiot whenever the plot needs to. She massacres dozens of people, but then hesitates to kill someone because, that's what the story needs to happen. She will stop at nothing to get revenge, but then gets cold feet and suddenly has a change of heart. But then she does a complete 180, abandons her entire life to seek revenge once again, but oh no! Another 180 and she doesn't want to go through with it anymore. It's just such a simple take on storytelling that is very obviously trying to be deep and original, but very clearly isn't. Part 2 didn't need to happen. If this is the story that they couldn't wait to tell, it really makes me worried about the future of Naughty Dog games. Yes, the graphics are amazing and the combat is slightly improved, but the framework is very much the same, and while looking for crafting materials around every nook and cranny is fine for 15 hours, it most definitely isn't for 25. And yes, the fact that this came out when the pandemic was starting to hit didn't do it any favors, considering this is one of the most depressive games I've ever played. And now, the big one, Cyberpunk 2077. This game was hyped beyond belief, and as a fan of both The Witcher 2, 3, and Thronebreaker, I was pretty psyched about it a couple of years ago. But then they announced that the game was no longer a third-person game and would be first-person only, and I thought, well, they've never done a first-person game before, nor a game set in the future. They've also never done driving or shooting, so that kind of seems like a whole lot of new things to try out at once. And the end result is a complete mess. It's actually the biggest mess maybe ever in terms of AAA releases. The game has been pulled from the PlayStation Store, for God's sakes. Now, to be fair, there's two parts to this: the way the game runs and what the game actually is. On PC, the game runs okay. It's riddled with bugs that crop every now and then, but it's playable. It's just in the same league as something like Fallout 76, which isn't good company. On the PlayStation 4 and Xbox-based hardware, however, the story is quite different. The game barely runs, at least for now, with frame rate dropping to 15 or so when the action ramps up. It is an absolute joke that after so many delays, this got released like this, and now that Sony has set its foot down in the absolutely unprecedented move of taking the game off the PSN store, I hope it sets a trend for companies to stop releasing broken-ass games to its customers. And then there's the actual game itself. I've played around 30 hours of it. If I were to guess, I'm around halfway through the main storyline, which is actually quite good. The city looks amazing and there's this really cool atmosphere, but most of it is just superficial. For an open world game, this is as basic as you can get in terms of interaction. The AI, both in terms of combat and regular NPC behavior, is maybe the worst ever in an open world game. Enemies will just stand there while you dump a shotgun round to their face. Citizens will crouch and stay still for several minutes after you've already stopped shooting people, not even running away. I've actually had NPCs turn hostile towards me because I dodged outside of combat. Like, no combat was happening. I accidentally double tapped S, dodged backwards, and the guy I was talking to started shooting at me because apparently dodging is not acceptable, It's just such a mess. This was all better in games like GTA 4, which is a 12-year-old game. Side quests are bland with very little storytelling and usually no NPC interaction at all in terms of dialogue, except for maybe like a phone call from your fixer to comment on the quest that you just did. Also, you don't know who the fixer is and how he knows you. It's just unbelievable. I've had dialogues where I honestly could not tell if I was getting the intended dialogue or something had just broken, because the things that I was saying and the responses that I was getting from the NPCs didn't match up. They didn't make any sense. Like, my dialogue options weren't triggering the proper response or something. It's bad. For this to be the next game from the guys that made The Witcher 3, a game renowned for its dialogue and quest design, is just an enormous letdown. Yes, there are some things that are cool, but when I go to a Ripper Dog to get a set of new arms installed, and it just boils down to an item getting dragged over to my inventory with no animations, no cutscene, no visual interaction apart from the menu. I don't get to see the arms getting installed. I don't even see them on the counter or something. The illusion of the world is just completely broken at that point. Cyberpunk is the most disappointing game of this year, no doubt about it. Yes, some people will really enjoy it because there are things to really enjoy, but calling this a masterpiece when it fails to deliver the bare minimum of what is to be expected from a game like this kinda tells you more about the person's ability to overlook serious flaws than the quality of the game itself. Okay, that's it for this video. Stay tuned for my top 5 best games of the year, which will be coming up shortly. Let me know down in the comments which game you found to be the most disappointing this year and whether you agree or disagree with what I said. Just please try to be civil down in the comments, please. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please consider subscribing, and as always, thank you for watching and I hope I will catch you in the next one.